Hello there, my name is Martin Henley. This is the Effective Marketing YouTube channel. And if you've spent a second here, you will know that I'm on a mission to give you everything you need to know about sales and marketing to be more successful in your business. So this is taking various flavors. I'm talking to anyone I can find. I'm sharing anything I can find that might be valuable. I'm talking about the news with people. There's going to be some reaction type stuff coming, and our WTF thing is back in production in the next couple of weeks. So this slot is stuff we love. So in November, I got a rather excited message from Melanie telling me that she's discovered this new thing that is absolutely going to blow my mind. We haven't spoken about it, but we are going to speak about it now. So no pressure, Melanie. You now need to blow our minds with this new thing that's got you so excited. So today with us, Concierge of Co-creation at, remind us the name of your business?
Crazy Might Work.
Okay, I didn't want to say that because it sounds so crazy. Concierge of Co-creation at Crazy Might Work. Melanie Farmer, how are you doing?
I'm doing really well. I'm really excited and loving my job as Concierge of Co-creation, which I guess is bringing stakeholders together to tackle big, complicated challenges together.
Yes, well, we had quite a wide-ranging conversation. When was that? That was a long time ago now.
It was August.
It was August time. Okay, cool.
Sometime around there. I'm just going to give myself a little bit more light. There we go.
Okay, there we go.
Light.
Cool. So some things caught your attention and got you excited, Melanie. Are we going to love this? This is the question and the challenge.
Right, hot or not? Now, I think it's hot. I think it's really exciting. It's called biomimicry. And basically, what we do as an organization is we look at methods for breakthrough thinking to solve whatever wicked challenge is in front of us as an organization or an individual. And we look to Nobel Prize winners, we look to thought leaders across the world in history. So a lot of the methods that we use might include systems and design thinking, which many people will be familiar with. And biomimicry has not been around very long. I guess that you could say that Leonardo da Vinci started playing with it, and I'll talk about what it is in a minute, in the 1400s when he started to draw flying machines inspired by birds. But actually now in the last few years, we've started to understand that nature has incredible solutions that have been field tested over 3.8 billion years. And we've shown up, humans, and we've only been here a short time, and we've not really understood the gift that brings. And so we have started to see design be inspired, innovation be inspired by nature in product design. But now we're starting to see that we could use it also in how we organize ourselves. And so we're turning to ants who have successfully been organizing themselves for 100 million years. And they do some really amazing things. For example, they're dropping pheromones to say, go this way, and different pheromones to say, don't go that way. And so they can communicate without actually going back to head office, if you like. And so in the digital world, some of our clients are using that to consider how their clients are dropping digital pheromones, if you like, and tracking and getting information that way and using that information in sort of advanced analytics. And so there are massive lessons from nature. The idea is to emulate nature's genius, which has been field tested, is usually sustainable, and is certainly connecting us more to our origins, which is nature. So we know it's nice to go forest bathing and go and walk in the forest and all of that. But do we realize that forests are successful because of mushrooms? It's mushrooms who feed sugar to the trees and take sugar, excess sugar, from trees who've got too much of it and go and feed it to a tree that needs it. So this is what mushrooms do. So we can, for example, in our organization say, if we are part of a system, we're a supplier, we have customers, but there are also government bodies, policymakers, other stakeholders, pressure groups who are part of the system in which we operate. If we were to look to a rainforest and we were to notice there's trees and there's mushrooms and there's all these other parts of that ecosystem that make it successful, perhaps we are the mushrooms or perhaps we're the trees, but are we aware of all those other parts and cogs? And have we thought about how we're activating those as partners? So we did work with one client who, when they did this map of the rainforest ecosystem, they said to me, we don't have anything we don't have mushrooms. Who would the mushrooms be? And so we started to think about who would their mushrooms be. And for them, it was actually consultants who would come and say, here's the latest, and feed them new ideas, and also learn from them and go and share that with other parts of the system, let's say. So they were like, we don't have mushrooms, you can be the mushrooms. But it's actually then they realized they had to activate us in a different way. And then we started to really drill down and say, what is it that mushrooms actually do? And how do they interact with ants? And how do they interact with these trees? And what can we do to emulate that in our own worlds? So we're seeing some amazing stories coming out of India. They, for example, had some real challenges with waste management. So their rivers were not everywhere, but they had some rivers that had so much waste that the waste was getting on fire, and it was too expensive to build a Western-style treatment plant. So a local citizen took inspiration from a cow's stomach to build a waste treatment plant. So cows have 4 stomachs. So this waste treatment plant has 4 stomachs. And the waste comes in one end of this treatment plant, and the outputs are half. So 2 of the outputs are soil and water, and the other 2 are actual waste. So they've now already halved the amount of waste that this system is producing, but they also halved the cost of building the facility. So they've now built more than 50 of those across India, and they're starting to roll them out in Africa because they're half the price to build, they produce half the waste, and the other half is productive reusable materials, soil and water. And they also they use something like 80% less chemicals to run these plants. So in many ways, a lot more sustainable. So who would have thought that a cow's stomach could be the inspiration for solving the waste problem in India? But this is what biomimicry does.
Okay. So you've achieved the first thing. You've blown my mind.
Nice.
Okay, good. To think that, to think that grown-ups, like high-ticket consultants, are now talking and comparing themselves to mushrooms, and it makes perfect sense. The cow one makes more sense because that is a waste disposal system. Do you know what I mean? It's a nutrition extraction waste. Okay, so you've blown my mind, and it makes absolute sense in that. So your business is called Crazy Might Work. This sounds absolutely crazy. But kind of your business is about resolving these really difficult challenges for businesses. Is that right? People come to you with the most difficult problems. And is this limited to like communication type issues and marketing type issues, or is it's broader than that? Is it broader than that?
So we have a taxonomy of strategies that nature uses.
Right.
And so we know that there are about 1,700 species that we've categorized these species, and we know what they do. So we have a resource that we go to for that. And we know that these strategies, there's about 10 major strategies that are useful in marketing and useful in growing your organization. So, for example, if you wanted to...
Okay, so it's internal and external communications type problems that people come to you with. Is that right?
Yeah, well, we have challenges like help us write our business strategy,
Right.
and then we have challenges like, can we sort out how to activate the Sustainable Development Goals in Australia or in the world or in the world of finance?
Right.
So it could be something like the Sustainable Development Goals, or it could be one of the goals.
Yeah.
Or it could be our organisation has to rewrite this strategy and we have to think about the future and we don't know what the jobs are going to be and so forth. So it could be something like that. So a whole range of challenges. So we do breakthrough thinking so that you find new ways and crazy ways of sort of approaching and thinking through those challenges. We create the conditions for breakthrough insight, which it will be no surprise happen in the shower or on a walk with your dog or that sort of thing, typically not at the desk, not at your office.
Yeah.
And when you're sufficiently relaxed that you're not even thinking about the problem. So if we want to solve a really hard problem, the thing we should do is have a nap, a shower, or go for a walk, rather than sit there and try and think our way through it. So we kind of turn off the intellectual brain and engage the subconscious. So we do these sorts of conditions to create insight. And then we take a person or an organization or a team or a collection of teams and stakeholders through the process of designing a solution. And
Yes.
one of the methods we might use is biomimicry.
Cool.
And so in biomimicry, we might say, okay, nature, and I'm just looking at the taxonomy and the strategy. So one biological strategy nature uses is maintaining community. So there are 214 life forms that we're aware of that we've categorized who do things to maintain community, which is a really important part of marketing if we think of our clients as community. And so within that, we say, well, do you want to cooperate to maintain community? Do you want to coordinate? So we're doing something together. Do you want to provide services? And so let's say we wanted to cooperate to maintain community. Then we can start looking at what dolphins do, what chimpanzees do, and I'm just looking through my list of different animals and so on. And there's all sorts of like early warning systems that penguins offer, things that spiders do, dolphins, flamingos, and so those things we can turn to and start to codify that and say, well, maybe killer whales is the answer because we know what they do is X and Y and Z. So how does that look in our own world as a marketer?
Yeah.
Can we adopt some kind of vocalization pattern so neighboring species understand us? So I'm using the language of nature, but it resonates for the human world. There's things that we can do that echo through the channels that we're using and the segments that we're targeting. And so it's trying to codify that.
Yes. So, okay. So just to give people a sense of how excited about this you're now thinking about doing a master's in this thing, biomimicry.
Yes.
Okay. So you because it sounds crazy. It really does sound crazy. Okay. So are we talking about finding... So instead of saying, okay, so you've got a problem, the problem is waste disposal. So instead of thinking, what on earth are we going to do about this waste disposal? You're thinking already, let's go to nature and find nature's most effective waste disposal processes and see if there is something in that makes sense. So this isn't literally, we're going to behave like orca. This is an analogy. This is how orcas behave. Is there something in there that might inspire a solution? Okay, good. It sounds less crazy.
Yeah, well, it's kind of one or the other. So it's either being inspired by nature as an analogous inspiration, or it's literally seeing what we can do. So there is a company in New York that has managed to harness the strength of spider silk to produce a material that will never need to be replaced. It's incredibly resilient and strong and durable. And so we don't realize how strong spider silk is because we could just walk through it. But they've kind of taken that spider silk, stuck it under a microscope, and now they are reproducing spider silk level fabrics, which are so strong that they predict that you'll never have to throw that t-shirt out, because it's made out of this material that's incredibly strong. But we wouldn't think of spider silk as being very strong because it is so tiny. But once you start getting it thicker,
Yes.
that material, you think about they can catch a fly. So this material, they can catch a 747 is what they're saying. So when you think of what is possible from nature, sometimes it is literal, that they're actually taking that thing, breaking it down and replicating that material. But in other cases, it's inspiring, like for example, from the cow's stomach. And other examples are organizational. So for example, in Southwest Airlines in America, they took inspiration from ants and reorganized how they manage overnight freight by copying what ants do. And that is that ants don't go back to the head office and check. And ants don't go in a straight line when they're delivering resources. So they thought, well, we're always shipping stuff from A to B. But is that the best way? Because ants don't do that, and they're far more efficient than us in the long run. So they gave the night teams carte blanche to use some parameters, but make decisions about what plane to put parcels on. The effect of that is they saved something, was it $80,000? I think maybe more than that, but just almost instantly. And they have significantly reduced the requirement of night staff, and they've filled cargoes by actually sending parcels in the wrong direction at first. So if you're trying to get a parcel from New York to Pasadena or something, you might say, well, you should just go this way. And they're going, actually, we'll send it to Detroit first, because we know that there's a plane leaving Detroit immediately and then going. So ultimately, the thing will get there quicker, because the next plane, whatever, to Pasadena is not for 3 days. So this is what they did. And you would think they're going to lose parcels, but they didn't. So they've actually been more effective at tracking, because they're the ones deciding on the ground what's going to happen to things. And so significant savings, but it was mimicking what ants do. Weird and wonderful.
Okay, but the danger must be, like you say, you don't necessarily think that a spider's web is very strong. And what was the other thing that you said? Like, so the danger might be that our perception of what's going on in a orca society isn't correct. Do you know what I mean? So, but I suppose it doesn't matter. Okay, that's really weird and interesting. And okay, so the other thing that occurs to me is that, like, Michelangelo did try and kind of reproduce what was happening with birds to get things to fly, but it didn't work. You know, if we look at the way that animals get around, we had to come up with the wheel. Do you know what I mean? So we had to come up with something quite different for it to work. Like, our method of flight is quite different from everything else in nature.
Yes. And you know what's interesting is we're realizing that if you look at hummingbirds, we're starting to think about how they manage to fly very differently to other creatures that fly. They can hover in one spot. So even now, we are rethinking the design of the aeroplane, because you take inspiration from birds and discover what is needed about in terms of, wind, torque, and this, and
Yes,
and pressure. We are rethinking now how we think about airplane design entirely. So we might find that because of biomimicry, that 20 years from now, there are airplanes that are entirely different, because we've now stopped our clever mind for a moment to really deep dive on what nature does. And we discover we've been copying the wrong animal when we've been thinking about flight. Maybe we should be looking at completely different creatures.
Yeah.
like kingfishers and hummingbirds and so on. So we know that this is starting to happen with some design. We're looking at very, very different inspiration. And of course, if we're to now fly without oil, which airlines are working on, that changes things completely, because we need to be concerned far more about weight. We also know that NASA, if there's anything that's going on those shuttles, it better be important. So their whole thing is take it off, because they are entirely concerned with weight and heat. So they are turning to nature to think about, well, where in nature can something take extreme temperatures and it's almost weightless? And spider silk is an example.
Yes.
So we might not be looking in the right places. That's the thing. And so it's quieting the clever human mind. That's the first step in biomimicry. We first realize that we might not have the answers and that we might be thinking too logically. And then we turn to nature and say, well, where does this happen in nature that we haven't looked before?
Good. Okay, so your business is called Crazy Might Work. So we have to expect you to be thinking about crazy things. Your customers are people like NASA. Is that correct?
Yes.
And people like the Australian government and health authorities. And so these are very successful and serious organizations that come to you for this kind of thinking. I just want to give people that so that they know that
Yes.
I haven't just bumped into a crazy person.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it is, the funny thing right now, because it's a kind of a new discipline. Whenever we say biomimicry, people ask us to spell it.
Right.
And then they write it down, and we might talk about 10 different methods, and it's overwhelming. And at the end of that, what we're finding at the moment is they're saying, can I ask a question about biomimicry? Because it's sort of new to them.
Yes.
And it is for breakthrough. Like the methods we use are for when you are really struggling with turning your culture around, or partnering successfully. I mean, where better to look than nature for partnerships? There's
Yes.
incredible partnerships happening in any forest you would walk into, or any ecosystem. And, it's understanding that a partnership happens when some part of nature relies on the other part of nature. It's very successful partnerships. They're not both good at the same thing. And yet we as humans gravitate towards our friends. We
Yes.
don't usually go and let's hang out with someone who's not at all like me. And yet that's exactly what nature does. Big and small hang out together. When
These
you look at
flowers.
whales traveling, yeah, I mean, you don't have whales hanging out with whales. You have little fish kind of hanging out with whales because it's safe.
Yes.
This is sort of what happens. So if I'm the whale, where's my little fish, that I need to go and kind of hang out with? So it's understanding how successful partnerships in that example, it's finding who's not like me
Yeah.
and partnering with them.
And I suppose in that example, it's about like mutually beneficial relationships. The little fish gets something out of being around the whale gets something of having the little fish around. Okay. I mean, so I love, let's say I love this. It's good. You've passed. Well done. You have
It's
blown my
hard.
mind to think that senior executives in huge world famous corporations are having these conversations. I mean, the thing about mimicking nature is that nature has some really nice things built in, like codependence, like sustainability, like
Nothing's wasted.
those kinds of things. So if it is causing people to have a little bit more humility about the way they conduct themselves in these huge corporations, then absolutely I love it. I think you've succeeded today. Well done, Mel.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I will say we recently did some work with the UAE government on using biomimicry to really think through help them, I suppose. We think their challenge was they would like to be the best government in the world. So, you know, no pressure. But one of the life forms they identified was date palms and what date palms do to distribute resources, and the other was whales. So they talked about, you know, how government is not trusted. It's often slow, and so they turned to nature and came up with the whale to say, well, whales are slow, you know, by comparison, but what a presence. And you know, we want to be around whales because we see them as peaceful. So,
Yes.
you know, we're big and slow, but people don't really think of government as being a peaceful whale. Can we be more like a whale? So then we did this whole process to sort of look at, you know, what it is about whales that we could emulate. And one of the funnier things that came up was their distant cousin was a hippo. So, you know, is there some sort of obligation to consider how we're working with Africa, where these hippos live? And so, you know, sometimes you end up going on a tangent that you would never have arrived at if you had have thought about it in the far more human, rational mind.
Okay, I am getting this on a open up kind of new channels of thinkings or new avenues of thinking, or like maybe as a source of inspiration.
Yes.
My mind is blown to think that the United Arab Emirates have engaged you guys and with the proposition, we want to be more like Wales, and you've gone back and said, have you thought about hippopotamuses at all? It's insane. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, who would think that that would be a useful thing to kind of explore? But you know,
Yeah, but I'm going to challenge you on that, because I would say, rather than who would think this would be a useful thing to explore, I would say, how come we've moved to a position where nature isn't the most obvious inspiration for everything? Do you know what I mean? That's what I'd say. I'd say, how are we so far removed from our environment that we're not looking to nature first for every solution? Do you know what I mean? Maybe the solution already exists in nature, you know? So whether you're
yes,
looking for a material, or whatever you're looking for, well, let's talk about physical things. You're looking for a material. Maybe that material already exists in nature, so you don't have to go through the process of extracting minerals to produce that material, etc., etc., etc. So, yeah, I would say, for me, it's only now we've had this conversation. Of course, nature is the obvious place. It's the first place we should be looking always for inspiration.
yeah. Look, I think it is. It's the humility of saying, well, nature's been field testing these solutions for 3.8 billion years. How could we possibly stop, not respect that experience? That's your best consultant right there. But we have spent, since the beginning of time for human history, we've spent those 10,000 plus years getting away from nature, finding every possible way to be in apartments and safe from nature.
Yeah.
We know that actually we get a good dopamine hit if we spend some time in nature,
Yep.
and as long as it's not on fire or flooded. And so, um, you know, there's certainly, we are starting now to realize that we have spent a lot of time running from nature, and also seeing nature as a resource that we're just extracting, versus a partnership where we're working together and in a partnership with nature. And if we were to do that, we're going to say, thank you for that lesson, ants. You've really given me this amazing gift, and now I'm going to go and try that in my own organization.
Yes.
Instead, we tend to say, let's crush the ants and eat them, or whatever. You know, our usual attitude to nature is one of consumption.
Yes. Good. I like it. And I think I've got an issue with this, like in my life, like this idea that you might be an environmentalist in 2020. Well, there was a time when we were all environmentalists, because we existed in the environment and we were dependent on the environment. And it's only now that we've become so far removed from it, because, like you say, we've cosseted ourselves in apartments, in cities, behind the internet. We've extracted ourselves, we've removed ourselves so far from the environment. And I know, like my thing is surf photography. I know I am absolutely at my happiest when I'm in front of a huge wave and I've got a decision to make. Do I want to actually stay above the surface and be taking this photo, or do I want to get smashed to bits? That is when I'm at my happiest, when I'm most excited. So if you say unless it's on fire or unless it's being flooded, I think being in nature, at the mercy of nature, is hugely exciting. And I think the reason we're suffering so much with depression and anxiety and all of these things is because we've taken ourselves away from where we're supposed to be. That's an entirely different conversation than the one you want to have about biomimicry. But if it's
There's a book
having
called... Go on.
if it's having the humility to say, we aren't right about everything, like maybe more efficiency or more security are the right goals, but there might be other ways to achieve them. Do you know what I mean? Like you say, we are all so caught up in this consumption mode that's really not healthy. Like consumption is a disease, it's really not healthy that we are so stuck on that. And if this is about saying, okay, let's look to other places for inspiration, other than the executives who've been extracting resources forever, maybe there's another way to do it, then I love it. Then you've achieved the goal today. This will go on Stuff We Love next Wednesday.
Great. And look, there's a book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. So it's really to your point that, we seem to get ulcers, but zebras who get eaten by lions are fine. They don't get ulcers. They're not depressed. So I think we need to look at that. And there's a whole book about, how zebras manage stress and how certain creatures like that are, you would think their lives are far less safe. They are much more likely to need to be stressed or depressed or whatever. But actually, there's a lot more joy in being a zebra who has nothing, you could say. And they have belonging and warmth and all these strategies that they use to have an amazing life. The second thing was...
I wonder if this was inspired by Marty off of Madagascar. Because he's cooped up in the zoo, isn't he? And then they find their way back to Africa.
Yeah, and then he finds his joy.
Yes.
So I think as well, it's looking... You touched on something which I'm interested in, and it hasn't yet made its way into biomimicry, which is that humans are part of nature. And actually, I'm interested in the lessons from the Indigenous traditional ways from the past. And there are some incredible projects going on around bushfire management, working together with Indigenous communities in Australia. But there are also many other, incredible lessons to be learned from organizations, organizational patterns and so on of ancient humans. And so, trying to also partner with that knowledge. So nature's knowledge and traditional human knowledge, so that it doesn't get lost, but also respecting that, for the most part, those old ancient cultures were very sustainable. It wasn't about consumption, it was about partnership.
Yes.
And we've only recently taken that turn.
So 2 things I want to say. The first is, I used to live in Johannesburg, and I maintain, like, Johannesburg is the first or second, depending which year it is, most dangerous city in the world. And I maintain that I was much less stressed when I lived in Johannesburg, because in that situation, you know what the danger is. If you get home and you haven't got a hole in your head, you've had a good day. So the stress is very real and very, it's very real. So in South Africa, they don't have to manufacture stress the way that we do in the West. So by the time I moved back to the UK and I was putting the news on, it was saying, be worried about your kids, be worried about the schools, be worried about education, be worried about the environment, be worried about the economy, be worried, be worried, be worried. I think that's a large part of where we've got to with anxiety and depression and all these things. And this goes to the core of Yeah, because there's a whole other thing that we could talk about another time. But I'm sure, not that this is a conspiracy, but the machine has realized that stressed out people spend much more money. And so the machine is working to stress people. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. And then the second thing, what was the last thing you said? About indigenous, about ancient cultures. Like when everyone was up in arms because Australia was on fire, I've got friends in Australia other than yourself. And when I spoke to them, they were like, well, we're not surprised because they haven't cleared the fuel for 20 years. So this was always going to happen because essentially the fuel for these fires has been left for 20 years because councils have decided, we're not going to prioritise that budget to clear that. So, hey-ho, 20 years later, you have these huge fires because there's 20 years of fuel there. And like you say, the indigenous people in Australia managed this for hundreds of thousands of years before we rocked up. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe they were just moving away. Who knows? It doesn't matter.
Well, quite nomadic for the most part, but yes.
Yes. So this is what I love about this. If it gets us away from this Western attitude of we always know best and what we do, then absolutely I love this because that, it seems to me, is an incredibly dangerous thing.
And I guess we're making the assumption that unhappy people spend more, but I wonder, is there a way or a place in nature or in Indigenous communities where we spent more when we were happy? If that was true, wouldn't it be great to have a society where actually happiness and spending happens together? Yeah. And it just depends on what you're actually spending on.
But they've done this as well, haven't they? So I would say there is nothing going on in nature where they are inducing a state of stress in the entire population in the way that we are. But they've done experiments, haven't they, with heroin in rats? Have you heard about this? Where they lace the food with heroin, and the rats will not touch it until you really stress the rat out, and then it will start to use the heroin. Do you know what I mean? So, 100% now I get it, and I'm with you. Clearly, the rats in that instance are delivering a powerful message, which is you have to be completely corrupted to want to take heroin. Even when they put the ants down with the real butter versus the margarine, the ants won't go anywhere near the margarine. Okay, I get it now. 100%. I love it. Well done. Thank you.
Yeah, and look, check out the Biomimicry Institute in Arizona, part of Arizona State University. To my knowledge, the only one in the world that's an actual institute dedicated to this discipline. And Janine Banyas, who's the founder and director, spoke at the COP26 late last year, and I think blew the minds of most of the leaders. And her message being, if we don't do this, if we don't learn from nature and we miss out on the wisdom that's just sitting in front of us, how embarrassing. And what a resource, what an opportunity to use this sort of method.
But not embarrassing, because embarrassing has to be the least important priority. Like how stupid or how wasteful or how whatever. Like, How cool.
Inspiring.
Inspiring. Let's go positive, inspiring. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and look, so I think that's it. You can look to nature and think, what do I need to do? I need to communicate better. I need to build a community. Well, where does that happen in nature? And literally, you could just Google a bunch of creatures who you think do a good job of communicating and building communities, and then just examine what they do to achieve that, and think, how could I mimic that? That would be a great place to start.
Yes. And what am I thinking now? I'm thinking that so the application in marketing is you want to be communicating effectively. If you've got your head screwed on, you want to be going into codependent relationships where you benefit your customers, they benefit you, and the same with your suppliers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I love it, Melanie. You've scored. It's brilliant. Nice. Thank you so much.
Get your ecosystem sorted and away you go.
Okay, I love it. I absolutely love it. I am going to look at some stuff and see if I can come up with some inspiration. Okay, cool. So thank you so much for today. I need to run because I've got another call in 3 minutes. But we're going to do the news tomorrow, so I'm really excited about that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, good. Great talking to you, and good luck with your next call.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks, man. Bye.
Cheers, Mel. Bye.